when because of the drought, the Harappan people started moving out and must have moved to different parts of the country. And subsequent to that, you see growth of civilization in the other parts of the country. So they obviously took with them their experience, their knowledge, their skills, and shared it with the people. That is equally important for us because that has an impact on what we are today in different parts of the country. And the second question which I have is, any comments on our efforts to understand the IVC script and to decipher it?
Since this is an attempt that has gone on for 100 years and has had no success yet, and we know also, as the book says, that real success in even in West Asian languages came when you could find something like the Rosetta Stone, in which multiple languages were written in the same script or the other way around, and therefore we haven't yet found anything like that. There's no stone or somewhere, seal somewhere, the Harappan language is used to write something in Akkadian or Sumerian or something, so that we haven't yet found. Until we come across something like that, it would be very difficult to think that it can be. That's a difficult question, I think.
But the first question
is also true. You see, when they moved to the east, especially when you move down south, you are getting into completely new climatic zones. Same things won't work. And when you look back at the beginnings of agriculture in South India, for example, what you see are pulses and millets that work. That's where agriculture starts in South India. So what they were used to in the Harappan civilization will not work. And as far as North India is concerned, while it may have worked to some extent, but as I said, they would have been a cultural shift. It's a cultural shift. Urbanism or urban ways of behavior was at a discount in North India after the last migration for a long time. And it took a long time for urbanism to rise again in the Malay Desha, about 1,500 years. So I think in South India, it would have been impossible to create an agricultural surplus again immediately after they shifted. But you are right in terms of many cultural practices and belief systems that were spread across in terms of actual urbanism happening, you do not see that happening either in North India or in South India until much, much later.
Mr. Bhattacharya.
Council's hypothesis.
Yeah.
And also my question is partly addressed to the former Director General of Archaeological Survey of India.
Yeah.
The Shantanu Council mentioned that probably when Harappan civilization decayed, the Harappan people started migrating southward, eastward, and maybe their theory and practices of urban management and urban development, etc., they carried with them to further eastern part of India and to the southern part of India. I was recently reading about a place called Chandraketu Gar.
Yeah.
Achula must be familiar with that. I have not visited that place, but the description says that that place has not been fully excavated. It could not be excavated because of certain difficulties. Some other people from other parts of Bengal came and migrated and built houses there, so could not be done. But whatever has been done is very much reminiscent of Harappa. Our idea of Mohenjo-daro Harappan civilization was so far confined to northwest India, Gujarat, Punjab, etc. But this article which I was reading talks about Chandraketu Gar, which is contemporaneous with Harappa. I do not know whether it came up at the same time, whether it was a part of the Harappan civilization or it was a post-decay Harappan migration. I would like to ask I'd like to have some light on this if you are aware. And
Yeah.
probably Achila can say something on this subject.
You want to? What you said is I completely agree with, because they carried and many of the understandings and practices. That's why it's called the source on the. That's why it's the glue. That's why many practices go back to them. The only thing that I was saying, the only difference that I was saying is that we also have to realize that urbanism or our cities coming up, whether in any part of the country, it may be that there were other parts that we haven't yet excavated, because we know for Tamil Nadu, for example, has been very poorly excavated. And many parts of southern India and eastern India too. So, but from whatever is existing evidence, we do not see urbanism coming back until very much longer. But many other parts of the Harappan culture and civilization were carried over. You can even see the script being used, as you have said, in some parts, including in the south, a few centuries later. So yes. So these cultural practices that they have spread around the country, and they have to be seen as ancestors of both South India and North India.
Mrs. Sengupta,
Yes,
Polly Sengupta.
Yeah, thank you for a wonderful talk, Mr. Joseph. Can you hear me? I can hear myself.
Yes.
Yeah, it's wonderful to know that all of us carry half the world's genes within us. We are really, really world citizens. That's great. But my question was about the mathematical concept of zero.
Yeah.
Now, the Western world keeps saying that it's from the Arab civilization.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I would like to think it's from us.
This is.
I keep hearing it's from the Arab world.
Yeah. Okay.
The mathematical concept, not the philosophical concept.
This is not something I have studied, but as I said, as far as my understanding goes, I had no doubt ever that this was a mathematical concept.
Abhijit
in India.
Mathematical and the political concept.
Abhijit Sengupta.
The discussion that had come out of Mr. Kansas and Mr. Bhattacharya's issue and Acharya's point of the Aryan invasion myth, I don't understand why there isn't enough emphasis being placed, for reasons which I don't understand at all, that South India, by whatever nomenclature you use, was as old in terms of population as North India in the times of Aryan invasion. Now, we know today that there are pockets which are the Vellore-Chennai belt, for example, the Kerala regions. There are new findings in Karnataka which are coming up which show that these are really maybe 100,000 years old and not just 20,000-30,000 years old. Now, if that is true, then it makes sense to see that the violence that was happening in North India at least, which is what you talked about. I was very impressed with that 2002 BCE to 100 CE, is also that 100 CE is also the time when Manu Smriti came, maybe 100 years either way, where Manu ultimately, obviously the great conqueror, because he subjugated a people permanently in India. That was actually most amazing, but that was also the time when communication came about, and that is not the Harari. Harari talks of how humans come up with communication and Neanderthals did not have it. But obviously this whole thing of the Vedic traditions, Vedic laws, rituals, systems and communicating came about in North India, which probably did not have as much of an influence at that time in South India, but there's not been enough work done in this area. Can you elucidate?
I think the fact that we did not have clarity on the foundational issues which is how did our population form. Only now, because of the advances in science, do we have clarity on some of those foundational issues. Since we did not have clarity on those foundational issues, many other later developments had unclarity too, because if you don't know this, then you fudge over many other questions in later history. So that's why there is unclarity. Now that we have more foundations are clear, I think the rest of the history should become much more clearer. And I mean, to say that, for example, I think the influence that what Aryavarta called Malaysia Desha has had on the rest of the country is very significant. If you look at Tamil, for example, there are a lot of what you call Indo-European words. But those words, if you look at them, you will find that the version of them is not Sanskrit, it's Pali. It's not Soundarya. It's, you will find a Pali version of, so which is different in Malayalam, which Malayalam has much more of the Sanskrit version. But why does Tamil have such a Pali version of Indo-European language words? Because the earliest influence would have been by Jainists and Buddhists. And you should remember that these are the first missionary religions of the world. There's no missionary religion that came before the Jains and the Buddhists. And Jains, at least, they didn't go outside of the country, but Buddhists took it all over the world. So, and I mean, that's a different point. But the point is that they impacted. So it is wrong to look at Indo-European or Sanskrit as one monolithic understanding. Now we know that these are different groups and there are different approaches, there are different attitudes, and you have to be able to distinguish between them, and then you will have a more finer grained understanding of how things spread and evolved. So yeah, sorry.
Shashwati, you have some question? Huh? No.
Mr. Consul raised this about linguistic thing. There are various confusing issues which come up.
Yeah.
For instance, those who did the, from Afghanistan, the archaeologists near Balochistan, they have claimed that there's a language or a dialect called Bruhi,
Yeah.
which is not a script, but which is related to Dravidian languages.
Yeah.
How do you explain people coming from the Hindu Kush area, coming to South India and having the same language, if this is plausible at all?
My book,
Dialect, possibly it is somewhat akin to Tamil.
that's Brahui.
That's what I wanted to know. I did read about it long back.
Yeah, it's the same language called Brahui, related to the Dravidian language family. But my book goes into it in much detail on the language question. The idea, all of these are linked. Let me complete it. The idea that the Dravidian language is connected to Elamite, which is the language of Elam in the Zagros region of Iran, again the same region. Actually, that predates the discovery of the Harappan civilization. From the earliest time, there has been suggestion, hey, there is a link between these two languages, the Elamite, which went extinct long ago, of the Elam, and Dravidian languages, and papers have been written on it decades before the Harappan civilization itself was found. Now what has happened is that archaeologically too, there has been links found by the person who excavated, the main archaeologist who excavated, you would know, the Mehergar Jadij. He talks about similarities between the early agricultural beginnings in the Zagros region and the Mehergar. So archaeologically there is a very close link. It's surprising the level to which there are similarities. Now what has happened is that genetically we have again said, the last few years, there is genetic link of, there's a migration from the Zagros region of Iran, of today's Iran, to northwestern India. So now we have from multiple things of a link between the two and the connection between the Elamite languages and the Proto-Dravidian languages. So it is possible that as the mixture population of first Indians and West Asians spread out and created agriculture and then the Harappan civilization, at least one of the dominant languages, if not the most dominant one, was a version or related to what is Elamite. and then later on became Proto-Dravidian, in which case it is not surprising that Brahui, which is related to the Dravidian languages, is where it is. While in most part of North India, the language got displaced by later migration.
The Harappan script has not been deciphered, but has the other linguistic evidence been analyzed? Because some Pakistani scholars are at pains to show that Punjabi is not an Indo-Aryan language, but has its roots in the Harappan language. And yet, when I read the Rig Veda, I am startled by the continuity with the modern Punjabi, especially the names of some birds and plants, etc., which comes really as a surprise when you're reading it. And what does the linguistic evidence show about this continuity? Because obviously, even though the language was superimposed or whatever, the changes which normally occur, some continuity would have been there, which the Pakistani scholars are emphasizing. Incidentally, my village was very close to Harappa, ancestral village, so maybe you're looking at a representative of the Harappans modern day.
On the language question, I have never heard of anyone suggesting that Punjabi is anything other than Indo-European. I am surprised.
Pakistani scholars are at pains to show that.
That it is, okay. Yeah. I will try and read this, but okay.
We'll take Mr. Mani before I come to you.
Yeah.
To this, because it's question on not on people, but on what people wear.
Yeah.
And this is as important as we see in as we grow up in life, as what we are is what we wear. Now, over the years, over these centuries, which you have covered very ably in your book, over these centuries, what have been the very many patterns of clothing development that has happened. Now, I remember when I was a young officer in Delhi, one of the finest pieces of writing I saw from Jawaharlal Nehru was not discovery of India or any of those other things, but a note he wrote in the office about what people should wear, both at work and at play. And that was a brilliant piece of writing, and I feel it should be taken to heart by people to understand why we live or dress the way we do, and in what ways we can better our quote-unquote performance in these aspects. Thank you.
It was a thread found within a bead that they discovered in one of the excavations. So the first place in the world where cotton was used, there's evidence, archaeological evidence of cotton being used, comes from Mahargarh.
Mr. Joseph, thank you for through with it. It's a little redundant after all the discussion just now, but the Harappans spread all over India, right?
Yes.
Now, their script or whatever their motives and script is still not deciphered.
No.
So, how is it that there's no trace of any of that in the rest of India, in terms of our script, or there is no connection, and it is so impossible to decipher when you say that the Harappans spread all over India?
See, the thing this is the one thing that I was trying to say is that we have to realize is that what happened at Harappa, what disappeared, itself disappeared from the Indian subcontinent for 1,000 years or more. So seals, writings, these are all critical when you have a city that is in trade. The level of trade that was there with Mesopotamia and the Harappan civilization is amazing. You have found seals you have found Harappan animals in Mesopotamia. There are seals, and the Harappans had mining activities in the Gulf to trade with Mesopotamia. They were participants in internal wars between Mesopotamians. So that's the level of extent and trade that was there between these two civilizations. And to say, when that disappeared, a whole lot of other things disappear. Literacy itself, we have to assume that disappeared for a long time, along with all accoutrements of the only things that would have remained were many cultural aspects, beliefs, people trees, sacred, or the fact that the stories that they were told, or the way that he built houses, or the way that he built bullock carts. And so there are a whole lot of other things, but urbanism disappeared. And I would think when they moved down south, it would have been, because urbanism depends on what? It depends on strong agricultural surplus, right? You have to be able to have the right kind of cereals that gives the right kind of productivity, so that only a small portion of your population is needed to work on producing food. And not a small, at least not the entire population doesn't have to be involved in working, producing food. They can be deployed to do other things. So that assumes productivity. That assumes a certain level of, not all cereals have the same kind of productivity. It assumes a certain level of agricultural package, a certain number of plants, certain number of animals. All of that gives you the productivity to move into urbanism. I don't think South, because of climatic and other factors, even if the Harappans moved down with their agriculture, it wouldn't have happened for quite some time. As far as North India is concerned, it might have been easier because it's the same climatic zone. I think you have to probably realize that what happened is a culture shift. A culture shift where a more Aryavarta itself, Varta means what? It's the turning around. Turning around of what? It's the turning around of the